Well, how's everyone doing today? Good? Who's enjoying summer so far? Yeah. Kids are home. Yeah, kids are home. Summer. I know we had some people who were at Holiday World this week. That holds a special place in my heart. Yeah, that's right. And we got some other families that are on vacation as well. And so it is the prime time of summer. And so we are so thankful and grateful that each and every one of you are here with us today. It is also Family Sunday, so all of our kids are in the room with us today, which we love and enjoy. We love having them here, love hearing their voices. I was just, even as we were sitting over there, I love hearing them sing. It's something that you don't hear when they're in their own class, but I could hear them singing with us, and that's just special in a lot of ways. So love that. Today, I want to ask you a question. Surprise, surprise. I want to ask you a question. Where do you find your worth? Where do you find your worth? We all find our worth somewhere, whether it's in ourselves, accomplishments, achievements. Maybe it's the approval or validation from other people. Maybe that's where we find our worth. Maybe we find our worth from how many likes we get on social media or whether or not our boss thinks we're doing a good job. Maybe we find our worth from our physical appearance. That's one that's big in our world, mainly because it makes people money. But maybe it's our physical appearance that you find your worth from, or maybe it's this sense that you have to live up to cultural norms, that you have to fulfill these cultural expectations that are placed upon you in society, or maybe it's this self-imposed level of expectation. I love a good overachiever, probably because I am one and I'm married to one. But we place these unrealistic expectations on ourselves, and then we judge our worth based on whether or not we meet those benchmarks that came out of thin air or last night's pizza. Or maybe it's just a general sense of success. That's what's praised in our world today. Did you make a lot of money? Did you do the right actions? Did you get the recognition and fame or notoriety that some random person in culture deemed was the appropriate amount? Or maybe you even find your worth in how spiritual you are. Maybe you like to go like full nun or monk, and you're like, I find my worth in how spiritual I am. I read 50 chapters this week of the Bible. That's not true. I didn't read 50 chapters this week. It's not true. But maybe that's where you find your worth, is in this self-inflated sense of spirituality. We all in our lives, doesn't matter who we are, doesn't matter where we are at in life, doesn't matter how long or short we've been on this earth, we all find our worth in or from something. What is it for you? Maybe take a note card out, maybe write it down in your journal. When you live your life on a day-to-day basis, what is the subconscious of your mind? What is it telling you that your worth comes from? Maybe it's not even something that you're conscious of. Maybe it's just you need to take time to recognize the way you behaviorally respond to whether or not something happened good or not. Or maybe it's a subconscious reaction to whether or not you made it to 50 likes on your Instagram post. Or maybe it's a subconscious longing to do whatever it takes to make your boss happy. Let me tell you, that ain't gonna work. We all find our worth in something or someone or something. Today, as we wrap up our series in the book of Galatians, we've been diving into this. This is our 5th week in the book of Galatians. We're going to be diving into the chapters, mainly chapter 5, maybe a little bit of chapter 6. And we're going to be diving into these chapters where Paul, the author of Galatians, he speaks to the church of Galatia, and he speaks to them on the topic of knowing and how important it is to know where their personal worth comes from. He wants them to know that it is essential that they have a true biblical, holistic, spirit-led understanding of where their personal self-worth comes from. And this fits perfectly as kind of a capstone in the alignment with the rest of our series in the book of Galatians. Paul has been talking about this theme of justification. We've been talking about this topic of justification and this concept that we are justified spiritually, we're justified physically, we're justified holistically through the person and the work of Jesus Christ. That through the life, death, and resurrection of God himself in the flesh, in the person of Jesus Christ, that is who we are justified through. Our salvation is through Jesus. The security of our souls is through Jesus. Our personal security, our self-worth, our mind, our emotions, our actions, we find justification in the person of Jesus Christ and the person of Jesus Christ alone. And in chapters 5 and 6, Paul kind of takes this conversation to the next level, beyond just like the theology and philosophy of finding one's justification in Jesus. Especially in chapter 5, Paul takes this conversation into the realm of our actions and our behaviors. Anyone have behaviors? Every human being has behaviors, so your hand can be up. We all have behaviors in our life, some which we're a fan of, some which we're not sure how got there. We all have actions that we make or actions that we don't take. We all have things in our life that we respond to, things that we interact with, things that we think about. And so in chapters 5 and 6, Paul takes this conversation justification through only Jesus Christ. He takes it into the realm of our actions and behaviors. You see, the temptation in our society, the natural predisposition of our culture is to, and I even see this leak into the church. Not just American culture, not just our culture. Our natural bend as human beings is to find our worth, to find our security, to find our justification for life in our actions and behaviors. I mean, just look at our world today. It is so common for us to feel self-worth on how well we performed. It is so common for us to feel self-worth because someone else valued what we did. It is so common to make ourselves beautiful, to doctor ourselves up only for the sake of so other people think we are moderately put together. It is so common for us as people to seek validation, to seek approval, to seek personal worth in our success, in our relationships, in how much money we have, and how you name it. It is so common for us to even to bestow this not so precious gift upon our children. I mean, for example, if my child succeeds in whatever, sports, art, education, whatever it is, why are we proud of them? Why are we proud of them? Are we proud of them because of the learning and the growth and the dedication and the enjoyment that they got from it? Or are we proud of them because it makes us look like good parents? Where do we as people, where do we find our worth? Everywhere you turn in society, someone, something, some organization, some company is trying to tell you that you can get your worth from what they offer. Yes, marketing. I mean, I love me some Chipotle. Don't get me wrong. I love me some Chipotle. But Chipotle, they actually do this in the sense where they make you feel like you're a good person because they use all natural ingredients in their food. They use all real ingredients. So that must make you a good person because you eat at Chipotle and they have natural ingredients. What they don't tell you about is all the additives they added to those natural ingredients. And so don't get me wrong, I love me some Chipotle. But there is constantly in our world, every situation is utilizing the knowledge that we are looking for something to find our worth in, for us to engage with their product, to engage with their system, to engage with who and what they think we should be. But in the book of Galatians, especially chapter 5, the Apostle Paul, the author Paul, he basically says, there's no basically about it. He says that there is absolutely no point in receiving approval and worth from this world, from other people, or even from our own personal ability to be spiritual. There is only validation, there is only worth, there is only justification in our lives because of the person of Jesus Christ. Only because of the person of Jesus Christ. And in the person of Jesus Christ, our lives have received their ultimate approval. They have received their ultimate approval. They have received their true sense of worth in the person of Jesus Christ, in who he says we are. Not who our boss says we are. Not how many times we shopped at Target this week for chic things says we are. Only in the person of Jesus Christ do we find our worth. This is such an important yet tricky topic because the concept of finding one's worth is something that does not always operate in our lives in a very explicit way. It's often very implicit in the way that we think, in the way that we respond, in the way that we react to other people. I know for me, in my journey, I have oftentimes found worth in my life in how much of a workaholic I am, in the approval that gleaned me from whoever was paying my check. That I was so concerned about making sure I didn't just work 40 hours, that I worked 50, 60, 70 hours so that they would be approving of me and in turn would continue to pay my paycheck. But that is not a life that is based out of the justification, out of the worth-giving relationship in the person of Jesus Christ. In many ways, that is a form of self-justification that I have imposed upon myself, saying that, oh, okay, it doesn't matter that I'm following Jesus. I still need to work 80 hours to be worth anything to receive this paycheck. That is a load of hogwash and extremely unhealthy, let me tell you. It does not lead you to a good place. Now, Am I saying if your job is just like your absolute favorite thing in life and you find so much enjoyment from it that you want to work 80 hours? No, I'm not saying it's going to be wrong for you to work 80 hours. But the question is, why are you doing X, Y, or Z behavior? Why are you working so hard? Why are you vying for your boss's approval? Why did you post 12 times on Instagram this week in hopes that you would at least get 15 likes on one of them? Why? You fill in the blank. We all have these things that we are looking for approval from. And if we are to be people of God, Paul in the book of Galatians, he tells them that you don't need to run that rat race of approval. You don't need to. It's a misuse of your energy. It's a misuse of your worth. It's a misuse of your time. Rather, we have to be people that in every circumstance, every situation, every response, we find our worth in the person of Jesus Christ and in the work that he has already done for us. Now, I'd like to give a brief caveat. It's kind of like breaking news. I'd like to give a brief caveat. Parents, your children need your affection and they need your validation. This lesson on justification in the person of Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone does not mean that when your child comes to you and wants you to encourage them or to uplift them or to say, hey, I need to be encouraged in this area, you do not need to say, well, I can't give you your worth. You need to go talk to Jesus. Because in your relationship with your children, you are an extension of the role of father to your children that God has bestowed upon you in the gift of parenting. And so we get the opportunity as parents to show God's grace, to show God's validation, to show God's worth in the lives of our children, because they are not in a place where they can learn and discover that for themselves. And you have been placed there by God to help them know that about themselves. In Galatians chapter 5, verses 5 and 6, the Apostle Paul says this: "But we who live by the Spirit eagerly wait to receive by faith the righteousness God has promised to us. For when we place our faith in Christ Jesus, there is no benefit from being circumcised or being uncircumcised. What is important is faith expressing itself in love." In this passage from Galatians 5 and 6, Paul uses this topic of circumcision, which is uncomfortable at times to talk about in general, but he uses this as an example, of finding one's worth in something other than God's work in our life, other than the person of Jesus Christ. Because to the ancient Middle Eastern audience, this concept, this topic of circumcision, it would have been a sign that someone who was circumcised was a person who was religiously acceptable, socially put together, right with God by their own means. This would have been the current and understandable example to the people of the original audience of the book of Galatians, that they did not have to perform these societal expectations to have Jesus love them, but rather Jesus loved them because of who he is and because of what he wants to do in our lives, because he is our creator, he is our God. And Paul says, in this passage, Paul says that in Jesus Christ, finding our worth in something outside of Jesus is a futile endeavor. It's a futile endeavor. It will never lead to the fulfillment, the validation, the sense of worth that we think it will. Back in the olden days, when I was a wee lad, is that a thing you can say? Sure. There used to be this concept of like the God-sized hole in your heart. Like this was the imagery people like to use, that you have this hole in your heart that only can be filled by God himself. That you will only have a full and true and complete heart when God fills that hole. Now, while that illustration might be quirky or dated or random and odd, it still remains true today. That we all in our lives have a God-sized hole, not just in our hearts, but in our lives and in their entirety, in our mind, in our spirits, in our behaviors, in our actions, that can only be filled, that can only be sustained by a loving relationship with Jesus Christ. Our world is a world that constantly fights to have us fill that proverbial hole with other things. With other things. Maybe it's whatever it is for you. I've already given like a bajillion examples. Maybe it's Chipotle for you. You'd have to eat a lot of Chipotle, man. But whatever it is, we all have this thing in our life where we can find worth from. And Paul says that in Jesus Christ, all of that is worthless, and that our approval, our justification, our self-worth comes from being a child of God, not doing something spiritually or religiously correct, not achieving a certain amount of respect in our society, not achieving a certain amount of money or worth, or having kids that grow up to be the bee's knees. None of that is worth anything in comparison to the worth that it comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ. This concept that Paul talks about in Galatians 5, it is really the grace of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the grace of the gospel of Jesus Christ at work in our lives. It is a grace that makes self-righteousness a joke. We've all had times, I'm going to guess, where we have tried to accomplish worth or feel worthy by our own actions. For me, it turned me into a workaholic. For you, it might be something different. For you, it might be an obsession with how many friends you have. For you, it might be an obsession with how put together your kids are. Or it might be an obsession with how many church services you've attended this year. Or maybe it's an obsession with climbing the corporate ladder or having more money. Whatever it is, Paul calls it worthless, and it makes this self-righteousness a joke. And in turn, it empowers the powerlessness of our lives to be filled with the power of God. You see, when we live out of this sense of self-righteousness, what we're really doing is we're ignoring the fact that we have no power to change our lives in and of ourselves. We are living in denial that we are sinful, that we are fallen, that we are not everything that even we ourselves want to be, and we're living in denial, thinking that we can change that on our own. The good news of the gospel is that you can't, but Jesus can, and he wants to, and he has gone before us. He has paved a way. He will work in our lives to transform us and to create worth and value in our lives in a way that no one else can, including ourselves. Now, oftentimes, when in church and you preach this kind of level of ultimate grace, this level of like, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter where you've been, it doesn't matter X, Y, or Z, it doesn't matter, that the grace of God will be made apparent in your life. At times, it can make people kind of be fearful that we're preaching this permission-giving grace that says, oh, hey, you're living in the grace of Jesus. You get your worth from him. Your salvation is from him. That basically means you can run around and do whatever you want. You don't have to change. You don't have to grow. You don't have to be transformed. It's like a one-way ticket to do whatever you want. That's simply not the case. Simply not the case. You see, when we as individuals, when we place our worth in self-righteousness, it generates a level of fear in our lives that someone is going to take that away. And grace does that. Grace makes self-righteousness powerless. And when we live out of a fear that preaching grace will turn people into doing whatever they want, that's really in and of itself another form of self-righteousness at work in our lives. And it raises the question of whether or not we actually understand the gospel in our lives. By the same token, while yes, technically, rules as written, as it's called in the board gaming world, rules as written, you could live however you wanted and God would forgive you. That's true. That's true. God would forgive you and you could live however you wanted. But it kind of misses the point. It kind of misses the point. Because while, yes, we could do whatever we want, Paul talks about how we are not intended to abuse the grace of Jesus Christ, but rather we are intended to allow the grace of Jesus Christ to transform us into being people who are more and more like Jesus every single day. To transform us into people that say, yeah, I could, but I don't want to because I love Jesus. And if we live a life that just says, hey, Jesus saved me, I can do whatever the heck I want, it also begs the question of whether or not we truly understand the work of the gospel in our life. Both extremes ask that question. The extreme of self-righteousness asks, well, do we truly understand Jesus' role in our life? But so does a permission-giving grace that says I can do whatever the heck I want. Because the true grace of the gospel is somewhere in the middle. For example, I love my wife and daughter. I love them dearly. But if I were to sit here and say I love my wife and daughter dearly, but then I went out and did something terrible to their health or their benefit or whatever, you would probably ask the question, did he really love his wife and daughter? Or did he just say he did? The grace of Jesus Christ in our life, it has the same type of effect on our lives. If we truly love Jesus, if we truly have accepted his grace in our life, if we have truly accepted him for justification and salvation, and we don't want to live in accordance with that. Now, let me caveat, I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. I'm not saying you're going to get it perfect every time. Lord knows I'm not a perfect husband every time or father. There's always times where I am learning and making mistakes. But if we're at least not asking God and pursuing God in a way that transforms our life, it asks the question about whether or not we truly have accepted Jesus for our salvation and justification, or if we've just said we did because it was the thing to do. Because when we live out of a true and healthy understanding of the gospel, it embraces this concept of ultimate grace in our life, but it also leads to a life that produces fruit. No, I'm not saying that all Christians are gardeners. It's a figure of speech. That we, in our lives, we begin to see through our behaviors and actions the work of the Holy Spirit transforming how we think, how we act, how we engage with others, and how we interpret situations. It changes our perspective on situations. And this is where, in Galatians chapter 5, this is where Paul kind of moves the discussion out of the there's unlimited grace into the what does it look like to actually have grace be actively at work in changing your life. It's not a pointless grace. It's a grace that leads to healing. It's a grace that leads to transformation. And this is where Paul begins to discuss this about how the gospel will not only offer us freedom from chains in our life, but will also transform us in the days to come. And now, like I said, let me just be clear. This is not an overnight journey. This is a lifelong journey of allowing the Holy Spirit to slowly but surely work on a willing heart to transform it into one that looks more and more like the person of Jesus Christ. Nor are these fruits any sort of religious rites. This is not some big passive aggressive attempt at me saying, yes, and one of those fruits is you're going to tithe. No, that's not what we're getting at. But rather, these fruits at work in our life, they're a reflection of the condition of our heart. They're a reflection of us becoming more and more like the person of Jesus Christ. These fruits of the Spirit, as Paul calls them in a second, they are evidence that we in our life have an active and growing and healthy relationship with the person of Jesus Christ. In Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23, Paul discusses what these are. They're classically known as the fruits of the Spirit. And Paul says this. He says, but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against these things. Take a moment. Think about, reflect, reread those. Which one of those is God challenging you in? Which one of those is God maybe encouraging you to take another step of faith in? Which one of those is God saying, in his deep love for you, that also convicts us at times, which one of those is he saying, maybe we could work on that together a little more? You see, when we live with the fruits of the Spirit as evidence in our lives, we, by extension, we are saying to God that we want our life to be a living testimony of the work that he is doing in our life for those who do not yet know him. We open the door, so to speak, for Christ to use us as a beacon of hope in a hurting world. I don't know if you know this or not, but one of the things that is ravaging our world is polarization, a division of ideas, a division of relationships, a division of you name it. Someone's mad at someone else about it. And when we allow the grace of Jesus to be our justification in life, and we allow that to transform our lives, to live a life that reflect the fruits of the Spirit, we get the opportunity to be different. We get the opportunity to be a light of hope in the midst of darkness. We get the opportunity to be a healing balm of reconciliation in the midst of division. We get the opportunity to show love and grace in the midst of those who are in fear or those who are suffering from people treating them poorly. We get to be people who bring people out of despair and into the life that God intended them to live. I love what St. Francis of Assisi, he's not a sissy, St. Francis of Assisi, I love what he says in his prayer. He says this. He says, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy." When we allow the justification of Jesus Christ to reign in our hearts, and we allow that to transform how we live, we get to be agents of reconciliation in a hurting and broken world. We get that opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity. Not always an easy one, but it's an amazing opportunity that we get as children of God. And so today, as we close this series on the book of Galatians, I just want to ask one final overarching question that kind of spans our entire series. The grace of Jesus Christ, it's there. It's there for you. It's available. Will you live out of it? Will you live out of it? Will you allow it to truly transform your life to reflect the work of the Spirit in your heart? Or will you seek other means of justification that are less and less effective? Will you accept the grace of Jesus? The band's going to come, we're going to stand, and let's sing one final song.